Manito church family. As hard as it is to believe, today is the first Sunday in Advent, and it's the Sunday that we think about hope. And you have gathered together virtually this evening to sing songs of hope, to hear a wonderful story of hope, and to light a massive fir tree that's right outside our sanctuary. And we light it as a sign of hope to our community during the Advent season. I'm so glad you took this time to join us this evening. All the songs for tonight's service can be found in your Advent care packages.
Hark, the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God
The story that I'm going to share with you this evening has some similarities to today's world. The setting is in a large city in the 1870s or 1880s, but you'll hear some of the similarities, especially in the disparity of economics. And also there's a lot about generosity in the story, and that reminds me of the generosity of our Manito family for the people in need at Shalom Ministries and Family Promise. So the story appealed to me in a couple of ways. I hope you enjoy it. It's called The House on the Alley, and it was written by Olive Thorne Miller. Anne, the old washerwoman, stopped ironing right in the middle of her ironing, and she said, "I declare, it's Christmas Day tomorrow, and I forgot all about it." "Well, a lot of good it'll do us," came a growling voice from the bed in the corner. "Well, I know we haven't had anything special, John, but we have had a roof over our head, and the rent's paid, and we have enough to eat, and we have a warm fire, and that's a lot more than a lot of people have." "Well, we'd have a lot more if you didn't care more for the needy folks upstairs than you do for your own family. Keeping a house full of beggars as if you was a lady." "Now, John, you're not half as bad as you pretend to be. You wouldn't have me turn them out into the cold, freezing weather, would you?" "Well, what I say is it's not our business to pay rent for them, and if they can't pay, we should turn them out. There's plenty that can pay." "John, you know these folks are honest, and when they had money and jobs, they paid regular every time. And how are they going to get jobs now with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people out of work in the city?" "Well, I don't care. What I say is turn them out if they can't pay." "John, then the children would freeze as well as starve?" "No. As long as I can work and stand on my own 2 feet, and as long as there are folks that can pay me to wash and iron for them, and as long as I can keep hunger away from you and our child, I'm not turning those people out." "Well, I sure wish I could have something for Christmas now, because I need another blanket and with my rheumatism and all, and I don't know how long it's been since I had a cup of tea." Anne didn't mention that she didn't know how long it had been since she had a cup of tea either. But then she said, "I feel desperately sorry that I can't get something special for Katie this year. You know, she's always had something in her stocking every year." "Well, she hasn't had anything special for so long, she probably doesn't even remember what it's like." "Well, I know, but you know, it was so hard keeping her out of school, her doing so beautiful and all. Well, and then now she's going around with her feet all on the ground too." "John, at least her shoes are better than the Parker children, even though I know they're bad." "What's that to us?" "Now hold your temper, old man. I'm sorry it goes so hard on you, but I'm not turning these people out, and that's that." Anne had finished ironing the shirt she had been working on, and she hung it on a hanger and put it on a line that stretched clear across the room. It was nearly filled with clothes she'd already ironed. John pointed up to them. "How much you gonna get for those?" "Well, I don't know for sure, but I know $2.50 has to go to this next month's rent because I'm short and there's only a week to go." "Well, I sure wish you could manage to get me some tea. A hot cup of hot tea would really hit the spot, I think." "I'll try." In her head, she began running fingers here and there, seeing if she could possibly take some pennies from the absolute necessity she had to get for the food for the family. By this time, John had dropped off to sleep because of the unusual exertion he'd been going through, and Anne was done with the ironing now, and she hurried about, taking the clothes down from the line, folding them, and placing them in a very large basket that was already half full. When all the clothes were in there, she laid a clean muslin cloth over the top to keep everything clean. Then she put on her hood and her shawl, blew out the candle because it must not burn any longer than necessary. And then she picked up that heavy basket and went outside, closed the door behind her. Anne's house was on the alley, and as she moved out of the alley onto the main street, she was amazed to see how many people were out there. It was absolutely crowded, and they were happy and laughing together, talking, and it looked like they were all very warmly dressed. And the shop windows were brilliant with Christmas displays. When she looked into the shops, she saw a lot of customers looking over their purchases. It seemed there was no want in this place. She moved with difficulty through the crowd with her heavy basket, but finally came out onto a broad street and stopped in front of a large, showy house. She rang the basement bell, and it was answered by a young servant woman. "Oh, it's the washerwoman. So just put the basket over there, and Mrs. Keith can't check it tonight because we've got company up in the parlor. It's Miss Carrie's Christmas party, you know." "Oh, well, I hope she can pay me tonight because I'm really counting on it. We need that money for food." "Well, I can check, but I don't think it'll do any good." And the young woman hurried upstairs and was back very quickly, saying, "No, Mrs. Keith doesn't have any money on her tonight, so you'll just have to come back in the morning. She'll pay you then." Anne left, feeling extremely disheartened and dejected, and as she walked along, she mumbled to herself, "It's even worse than I thought. There's not a morsel of food in the house, and not a penny to buy any with, and I know the good book says that the Lord will provide, but sometimes it's really, really hard to believe." When she arrived at her home, she sunk down into a chair in front of the expiring fire. She was tired, her bones ached, she was faint from lack of food, and she put her weary head into her hands and thought, "Where can I get any money?" She knew that she had sold or pawned every item in the house that she could do without and that had any value at all in previous emergencies. So she had to conclude that they'd have to go to bed hungry that night with no food. Of course, John grumbled, but Katie cried from her hunger. When the two of them were finally asleep, she crawled into bed to keep warm. She was more disheartened than she'd ever been, she thought. She just could see no way ahead. And yet, at that very moment, the darkest the house on the alley had ever known, help was on the way. A young city missionary had called on one of the needy families upstairs and heard about Anne's charity for that family and the other families, and how she had denied herself of every comfort and endured the grumbling of her husband and the cries of her daughter. So the young missionary told a group of his friends Anne's story that night on that Christmas Eve evening, and their hearts were touched and troubled, and they took out their wallets and their purses and they placed money on the table in front of the young missionary and asked that it be given to Anne. So Anne was disheartened, but help was on the way. The next morning was Christmas Day, and it dawned clear and crisp and cold. Anne was up early, as she always was, and she started the fire with the last of the coal, and then she straightened up the two rooms and prepared to go out to try to get the money for the breakfast. She opened the door, and there stood the missionary. "Good morning, Anne. Merry Christmas." "Well, good morning to you, sir, and same to yourself. Have you had your breakfast yet?" "No, I was just going out to try to get it." "Well, I haven't eaten either because I was too excited to eat. I wanted to get over here and give you your Christmas present. Have you had any presents yet?" "No, I don't remember the last time I had a Christmas present." "Well, you have one now. Let's go inside and I'll give it to you." So they went inside, sat down at the table, And the young man placed a roll of bills on the table in front of her. Anne looked at it. And it's okay. This comes from some friends of mine who heard about your generosity to the folks upstairs. And they admire you and they send you this with best wishes for Christmas. It's your money. Do with it whatever you want. But no, don't try to thank me, Anne. It's not from me. And just enjoy it. And maybe try to think of it this way. It does them more good to give than it does for you to receive. And with that, he was gone. And what did that old washerwoman do? She sank down on her knees, buried her head in the bedclothes, and thanked God. Well, a torrent of words brought her back to reality. Her husband was just throwing questions out one after another, and she stood up and got herself into control and listened to him, and he was saying, "How much money is there? Well, why don't you talk? Have you been struck dumb? Oh, wake up, woman. Oh, if I could get you, I'd shake you till your teeth rattled." And she knew he meant it by the vicious look on his face. And she said, "Well, I don't know how much money there is, John, but I'll count it now." So she sat down at the table and began to count. And she was counting the money and said, "John, there's $10 bills in here. 20, 30, 40, 50, and there's $20 bills. 60, 80, 100. Oh, there's $125 in here. I'm rich. Oh, thank you, God. I know I doubted for a while, but it's really hard to believe when things are so hard. Thank you. Katie, darling, wake up. It's Christmas. Merry Christmas, darling. Oh, I just feel like I'm going crazy." But she didn't. She was brought back to reality again by her husband, enumerating all the things he wanted. "Now I can have my tea and sugar and a blanket and I'd really like some tobacco and a pipe maybe," and he went on, naming a lot of other things he really wanted. Anne hurried about the room, hiding the money very carefully in a lot of various places. And then Katie came out and said, "Is it really Christmas, Mama?" "It's really Christmas. Yes, Merry, Merry Christmas. And just wait till you see what's going to happen. Now, I'm going out to get breakfast things, and you, both of you, be very, very careful. Not a word to anyone about this money." "Oh, we'll be robbed." "Oh, nonsense, John. I've hidden it carefully, and besides that, if we don't say anything to anybody, nobody will know we have it. So not a word from either one of you." And she went out to get breakfast things. She was back very quickly and had breakfast on the table. Sausage, potatoes, tea, hot tea with sugar, because John would not drink tea without sugar. And Katie and John devoured that meal just very quickly. Well, Anne drank her tea, but she kind of nibbled on her food, kind of absent-mindedly. And when everybody was finished, she stood up and said she was going out again and asked Katie to wash the dishes. And again, she reminded them, not a word to anybody about the money. And I'll be back as quickly as I can. And I want it kept secret for another reason, which I'll tell you later. So she went out, and as she walked away from that house in the alley, she was moving rather slowly and kind of mumbling to herself, "I'm going to give them a really happy day for once. And I suppose John will grumble, but, the good Lord sent me this money, and I'm going to use it for them. Some of it, at least, for them, so that I can make a really good day for them." And then her steps quickened, and she went from shop to shop in her neighborhood, picking up the things that she needed and the things that she wanted. And she was home, not before too very long, with a big basket that was packed full, and besides that, she was carrying a package besides. She set the basket down and began to unpack it. First for John. "John, here is the tea. a whole pound of it, and sugar. And here's a pipe and tobacco, and here's a blanket for you. Oh, can you give it to me right now so don't wait to unpack other things? She did. Then she turned to Katie and said, Katie, here's material for a new dress for you, and there's new shoes, and there's woolen stockings so you can stay warm this winter. Oh, thank you, Mama. Thank you so much. Oh, and when can you make my dress? Tomorrow, darling. And you can go back to school, by the way, too. Oh, goody. Oh. But I wish that Molly Parker could go back to school, too. Well, Molly, let's just wait and see what Christmas brings for Molly Parker, shall we? And then she continued unpacking the basket, and she took out a beef roast and potatoes, turnips, a head of cabbage, and bread and butter and coffee. And what's going on? Are you going to have a party? Yes, John, I'll tell you just exactly what's going on, and you don't need to grumble because it's as good as done. I'm going to fix a fine Christmas dinner for every person in this house, and they're going to have a full stomach, and they're going to be warm for once. And Katie, darling, now you run upstairs, and you invite every single person. Start with the fathers, go right down through Mrs. Parker's baby, and tell them to come at 3 o'clock. We'll have to eat at a fashionable hour because it's just so late getting started now. And remember, not a word to anybody about the money. And Katie, darling, hurry back because I need your help. With that, Anne began to prepare the meal. Very soon the pudding was done, and the meat and the vegetables were cooking. And there was a long table spread out across the room. She'd had to borrow every table, every plate, and every chair in the house in order to have enough for every person to have a place to sit. At 3 o'clock, the guests arrived. What a sight they beheld. That table was just laden with piping hot, substantial food. To them, it looked like a luxurious banquet. John was seated at the foot of the table in an armchair, and he was dressed in a suit, and just bustled about, welcoming everybody and showing them where to sit. And there was a place for everyone. Then, what a meal it was. They just enjoyed it so much. The children stuffed themselves, and the parents watched with very close to tears because they were so grateful to have their children have a fine meal for once. And John sat down at the foot of the table, and he smiled, actually, and he urged people to send their plates down again to be filled over and over again. And Anne was just the life and soul of the party. It was a wonderful, wonderful meal. And at the end of the meal, the women of the house insisted that they were going to do the dishes and clean up, and the men pulled their chairs closer to the fire, and John actually shared his tobacco with them. Anne took that opportunity to slip out of their 2 rooms, and she stopped at the closet under the stairs and picked up 4 packages and then hurried upstairs. And she was back again before anyone hardly missed her. What a day that was at the house on the alley. The guests stayed well into the twilight, and then they talked about remembering their old homes in the fatherland, and about the hard winter that they were experiencing, and their hopes for the work in the spring. And then, when a little bit later, they went upstairs to the chilly discomfort of their own rooms, and each family found a package. And in that package was a warm dress for the mother, a warm shirt and socks for the father, and new shoes for each child in the family. Meanwhile, downstairs, Anne was reckoning the expenses of the day, and she smiled to herself. I'll have enough money to pay the rent and buy coal clear through spring so I can maybe rest my old bones a bit. And John can't really grumble anymore about them staying on, because it's because we kept them that we were able to have such a wonderful, happy, blessed Christmas day. Thank you, God.
The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. How silently, the wondrous gift is given. So God imparts to human hearts the blessings of his heaven. No ear may hear his coming, but in this world of sin, where meek souls will receive him, still the dear Christ enters in. O holy child of Bethlehem, descend to us, we pray. Cast out our sin and enter in. Behold in us today. We hear the Christmas angels the great glad tidings tell. Oh, come to us, abide with us, our Lord Emmanuel.
Hi, Manito Church family. We are going to light this tree for the beginning of the Advent season in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay! Thank you for joining us tonight. I hope our time together brought you hope and joy. Let us all go out this week seeking to live our lives in a way that brings hope to everyone we meet. If you have some time this week, I hope you drive by the church in the evening to see our sign of hope and the lights that are on our tree outside our sanctuary.
Heart with pure delight. Oh, Christmas tree, what